When you are faced with d4, if you are looking for a solid, positionally sound response, you will be hard-pressed to find a more respected and reliable system than the Queen's Gambit declined. We reach this classical opening after the moves d4, taking space in the center, and preparing e4. Black can discourage this plan by playing d5, taking a fair share of the center and controlling e4. White's most ambitious and popular option is to turn the game into the Queen's Gambit with c4. White increases pressure against Black's center. If Black plays d takes c4, this turns the game into the Queen's Gambit accepted, the subject of another video. In that variation, Black needs to be well prepared to justify allowing White to grab more space in the center with e4. Instead of capturing the pawn, Black needs to decide how to respond to White's threat of c takes d5, trading a flank or non-center pawn for Black's central d5 pawn. If this pawn falls, then White will take over the center with e4. This means that Black should add support to this important pawn with either c6, leading to the Slav or semi-Slav defenses, or else turn the game into the Queen's Gambit declined by playing e6. This move reinforces the center, preparing to respond to c takes d5 with e takes d5, so Black is able to maintain a strong central presence. The drawback of this solid move is that it restricts the light-squared bishop, so it will be important to find a good role for this piece. We can see the battle over the d5 square intensify after the natural moves knight c3, centralizing the knight and adding pressure against the d5 pawn. Black can respond in kind with knight f6, developing and reinforcing the central stronghold on d5. One popular option for White is to play c takes d5, known as the exchange variation, which we'll discuss in another video. The most classical response for White is to rapidly develop with bishop g5, pinning the f6 knight to the queen, which applies indirect pressure to the d5 pawn. White has created the positional threat of bishop takes f6, damaging Black's pawn structure after g takes f6. If Black responds with queen takes f6, this actually loses a pawn after c takes d5. With this in mind, Black typically responds with bishop e7, unpinning the knight and preparing to castle. White can continue to develop with knight f3, or likely transpose to the same position after first playing e3, supporting the center and opening up a diagonal for the light-squared bishop. We are going to examine two of Black's most popular defenses in this classical Queen's Gambit declined position. In both of these opening variations, Black will include the move h6, either immediately or after castling the king to safety. White continues to develop and support the center with knight f3. Black has a variety of choices in this position, but in order to reach the mainline defenses, Black needs to play h6, immediately putting the question to the bishop. Although it's generally not a good idea to move pawns in front of your king too early, this is a useful strategic move, forcing White to declare the bishop's intentions. Since the pawn is no longer on h7, it does not rely on the defense of the f6 knight, which may be traded or will seek activity on another square. This is especially important if White decides to create a queen-bishop battery on the b1 to h7 diagonal. In response to h6, White's most popular response is to maintain the tension with bishop h4. But White may also consider playing bishop takes f6, surrendering the bishop pair after bishop takes f6. White can calmly continue to develop with a move such as rook c1, adding pressure down the c-file and likely castling kingside. If White is feeling aggressive, then queen c2, followed by castling queenside is another option to consider. Depending on the position, Black may play for a quick c5 break, trying to activate the dark-squared bishop on the long diagonal. By removing the f6 knight, the d5 pawn has less protection, so another plan is to solidify the center with c6, which then allows knight d7, opening up the possibility of preparing an e5 break, often with the sequence d takes c4, followed by e5. This sideline is an interesting option with plenty of play for both sides. In response to h6, White's typical response is to maintain the tension with bishop h4. We have now reached the traditional main line of the Queen's Gambit declined, in which Black has two popular choices. One idea is to offer an exchange of minor pieces with knight e4, known as the Lasker defense. The other option, which we'll examine first, focuses on immediately addressing the issue of the light-squared bishop. Since the e6 pawn blocks the bishop, a natural move is b6. Black's idea is to fianchetto the bishop on the long diagonal with bishop b7, supporting the center. The other main point behind b6 is to prepare the important central counterstrike, c5. In order to understand the basic ideas for both sides, let's take a look at a Grandmaster game in which both players continue to focus on sensible development while fighting for the center. Grandmaster Wang Yue, with the white pieces, played the natural developing move bishop d3, developing the bishop to a natural diagonal and pointing toward Black's kingside. Sometimes Black decides to play d takes c4, giving up the central stronghold to open up the long diagonal and create active piece play with bishop b7. By capturing on c4, this also allows White active chances with a space advantage in the center, so it is not without some risk. Grandmaster Michael Adams, playing Black, continued with the classical developing move, bishop b7, developing the bishop and reinforcing the center. After White castled, Black develops the last minor piece with knight b to d7, supporting the knight on f6 and also preparing the thematic pawn break c5. White centralized the queen with the natural queen e2, supporting the center and connecting the rooks on the back rank. Notice that Black will not have an easy time accomplishing the same thing, as Black's queen does not have a useful square to use. Grandmaster Adams solves this problem after first striking in the center with c5, adding pressure against White's d4 pawn. White maintained the tension in the center and continued to develop with rook f to d1, centralizing the rook and lining up with Black's queen on the same file. This is not a good sign for Black, especially if the center opens up. Grandmaster Adams played the instructive move, knight e4, centralizing the knight, which is well supported by the pawn on d5, as well as the light-squared bishop. Notice by moving the knight, it reveals the tension between the dark-squared bishops, offering a trade of minor pieces. White cannot easily avoid this trade, as bishop g3 allows knight takes g3, when Black gains the bishop pair in a comfortable position. Since White does not have any attractive alternatives, the most natural continuation is bishop takes e7, queen takes e7. After trading the dark-squared bishops, Black's queen has found a useful square, connecting the rooks on the back rank. We have seen the tension continue to build in the center, and White finally releases some of the tension with c takes d5. This capture helps open up the c-file, as well as increasing the scope of White's light-squared bishop on the queen side. Black regains central control with e takes d5, when White completed development with rook a to c1. White's rooks enjoy active files in the center, and as we'll soon see, White is prepared to change the central pawn structure with d takes c5. If Black wants to avoid this pawn structure, then Black can consider playing knight takes c3, with the idea of resolving the central tension after rook takes c3 and c4. Black gains a tempo against the light-squared bishop and prepares to expand on the queen side with b5 when Black enjoys a solid position.